NSW. Forensic scientists of Reddit. What is the most WTF case that you ever had? A friend of mine is a CSI, and I don't know if he's posted here, but just in case he hasn't, I'll put this here. Anchorage, Alaska, 2008. A 27-year-old woman hasn't paid her rent in 4 months. The landlord gave her a bit of a reprieve because he knew she was very poor and she was in low-income housing. But after 4 months of zero contact, enough is enough, and he calls the cops to get into her place and either see her to talk or change the locks and remove her stuff to a storage shed so the apartment can be released to someone else. The cops find the front door to be bolted and use the landlord's key to get in, then find the woman dead in her shower, just sort of slumped as if she fell against the wall and slid down. The water wasn't on, and as this is AK in the winter, the water is never shut off by the city because if hot water isn't moving through the pipes they freeze and burst. The fact that her shower is off means she never turned it on, or someone turned it off. The body is taken to the morgue and autopsied at the family's request because no obvious means of death can be found. As far as the examination could conclude, she died from an adrenal surge causing her heart to stop, more commonly known as frightened to death, which yes, can actually happen in some rare cases. The body was old, but no test showed any residual drugs in her system. None were found in the apartment, nor was any sign of anyone having entered or left before the cops. The young, pretty average health woman appears to have gotten into her shower, and then her heart stopped due to terror. As far as I know, that's where the story ends. No substantial leads. A friend of mine is a forensic scientist and her department dealt with burglary cases only. Her only good story is that once she got a pair of gloves found at the crime scene, she went to examine them and felt that there was something hard inside. She turned the gloves up to get it out, and out falls a thumb, ripped off at the first joint. Apparently this particular burglar was holding up a safe while his mate went underneath it, dropped the safe on his hands, ripped his hands out and ran. They obviously caught the guy. Prof showed a case where a guy killed himself by holding 2 forks on a table, then proceeded to headbang towards it, stuck both his eyes in. Not a forensic scientist, but my mom knew a lady whose son offed himself pretty brutally. While the parents were out, he got a shotgun from the gun cabinet, went to his room, and set it up with string and pulleys on a chair so that it would go off when the bedroom door was opened. He sat in the chair for what may have been hours. Parents get home, mom goes to check on son, bang. That poor woman needed some serious counseling. I can't imagine the guilt, and it was pretty crappy of the kid to make one of his parents unwittingly do the dirty work for him. Father-in-law is a cop. Years ago, he got called to a scene of a death by hanging. The body had been there for a while. Apparently the deceased had managed to do quite a bit of damage to his neck vertebrae, because his spine had snapped and his neck stretched down several feet from the nose. The cops at the scene took pictures of giraffe neck and passed them around the department. Somehow, my wife saw the pictures when she was at the tender age of 12, which screwed her up good enough to be a suitable mate for a guy like me. Always good to hear a happy ending. A friend is a psychologist whose previous life was in crime scene photography. She went to the scene of a suicide in a garage. This guy had a project car that he had worked on his whole life. When he decided to end it all, he wanted to go with the car. So he shut the garage and turned on the engine and waited. To top it off, he had taken a bunch of pain and sleeping pills. When my friend got there, it was a good while after his death. EMTs and other specialists were there looking for details and whatnot. He was the VP of a fairly large chain of local businesses, so there was an insurance settlement to consider. My friend is in the middle of photographing the scene and the guy was laying there, pronounced dead hours ago, and he suddenly just shook hard. She thought it was a death rattle, so she kept taking pictures. Eventually the guy sat up and nodded and the EMTs were called back in to stabilize him and eventually save him. Apparently the car had run out of gas right at the moment he went out and he was pronounced dead on the scene. He couldn't talk or do much, but he had actually survived. A man tried to assault his wife, and when she fought back, he took her by the ears and smashed her head repeatedly on the corner of a table until her head became concave. When questioned by the police, he said he had found her lying down upon coming home, and gently shook her to see if she was awake. It was like that when I got here has its limits. EMT here. We had a guy who was naked, bloodied, and tortured. then left outside in -10-degree weather until he froze. We found him literally frozen maybe a day after the fact. Now, my question is, how the heck do you move a 230-pound popsicle without breaking it? I interned at the office of the chief medical examiner when I was 18. Saw a lot of interesting stuff, learned a lot of interesting things. One case stuck with me more than the rest. I arrived one morning, went down to the basement where bodies were laid out for rounds every morning. On tables lay the usual, a couple folks who died in a hospital and needed a partial autopsy to sign off on a death certificate, a drug overdose, a drug murder. Then, on one table, there was a blue Tupperware bin, a big one, about 3x 2 feet. It was filled with concrete, and out of the edges a little plastic wrap was lining between the concrete and the bin, and then out of the top of the concrete a couple toes were poking out. The story was out in the country. A family saw a small fire in the woods outside of their house, called the fire department, and after putting out the flames, they found this bin. When we cracked the bin open we found half of a man, about from the belly button down. Someone had thought the best way to dispose of this body would be to cut it in half, wrap it in plastic, put it in a Tupperware bin, fill the bin with concrete, and set it on fire. What they had really done was essentially cook the body in an oven, with the plastic wrap acting as a roasting bag. Skin was sloughing off of the legs and feet, and the skin was discolored by this time, a nice green. Though this was about 10 years ago, I distinctly remember still being able to make our saw marks on the top edge of this half, however. Digital forensics. Drug dealers love taking photos of their girlfriends in their underwear. They also love taking photos of their stash. The geniuses hardly ever turn off location services, so each photo is geotagged. A case of someone found dead from a gunshot wound to the heart, on a bridge, without any weapon, bullet or cartridge case. Circumstantial evidence finally indicated they killed themselves, but we still don't know how he got the weapon to float away. The bottom of the river was searched, and nothing was found except the tools of the bridge builders. Worked at a Mies for a bit, had a couple pass away from a 2-person plane crash. When the autopsy began it smelled a bit like burnt barbecue and the people in the body bags weren't in your typical dead lying flat position. They were kind of stuck in a fetal position-ish. Opened up the bag and I saw weird bumps on each of their heads. Asked the ME what was up with the bumps. I guess at high temps the brain expands and needs somewhere to go. At some point it just kinda pops out of the skull. So their brains were some inside some outside of skull. Then we try examining the body, and it looks like a cheap prop from a movie. I notice a wedding band on the female passenger and try my best to remove it. The whole finger comes off with it. Felt kinda bad. Then I spent 10 minutes trying to clean off what I can only imagine was human grease and burnt flesh off the ring so we could package it up and eventually return it to the family. Plane crashes are pretty crazy. One of the best cases on forensic files was cold case that had gone unsolved for decades. A man told police he had picked up a hitchhiker in the evening. After the man and the hitchhiker got into a fight, the man threw him out of his car 2 miles away from his mother's house on a busy highway. The man later came home to his mother's house only to find the hitchhiker at his mother's house. He left to go call police from a payphone. This was before cell phones. The police found his mother dead in bed. The man was a beneficiary of a huge life insurance policy and was the prime suspect. The cops or anyone did not believe the man's story. It was inconceivable that the hitchhiker, who did not know where the mother's house was, could make a 2-mile journey with turns in a neighborhood to just randomly break in and kill the man's mother, who he didn't know. But there was blood at the scene and a palm print on the staircase that was not the man's nor the mother's. After some investigation, people at Hardee's did confirm that there was a man that fit the description looking to hitchhike. Still, they just assumed the man had paid the other man to kill his mother. 15 years later, after the invention of CODIS, the DNA was matched to a career criminal who definitely matched the description of the hitchhiker. After bringing him in and interrogating him, the killer had no idea he had killed the mother of the man who gave him a ride. He simply walked through this neighborhood looking for a house that looked empty and his mother's was the only one without the lights on. It's baffling. Crime scene tech here. This one stands out as I was still training at the time. Killed themselves by gunshot. Guy went to an indoor range and rented a monster of a revolver. This thing could shoot 410 shot shells. The force basically blew the top of his head off. What remained of the skin from the top of his head was flapped into the skull cavity and his eyes looked like they were bulging out. Blood and brains up to 10 featuring away. Found his safety goggles about 10 yards downrange. The scariest part was he was watching others shoot beforehand. Sometimes I wonder if he planned to take others with him. I was at a regional medical center in rural Guatemala when we had a case come in from an OTA, road traffic accident, involving a pedestrian and a chicken bus. For those of you who don't know, a popular but incredibly dangerous form of public transport are retired American school buses that have been painted all sorts of vibrant colors, but underneath the mechanics are shot to crap. Anyway, this pedestrian had been hit by one of these rolling death traps which was fully loaded going around 80 miles per hour and ended up getting wrapped under the front right wheel arch and completely mangled beyond recognition. They found bits of this guy spread 2 kilometers down the road as the initial impact had split his torso down the middle and basically turned him inside out. When all the bits had been collected, the height of the body bag was around 2 inches, so you imagine the state of the remains. Passers-by helped us pick up bits from the side of the road, but dogs and cats ran off with a fair amount of the smaller bits. Guatemala is a cool place. Not a forensic scientist, but I majored in anthropology with a focus on forensic anthropology. Given that, I was a fairly regular reader of the Forensic Science Quarterly. Here are a couple that I remember. Kid found on top of an elevator in a 6-story dorm. Apparently he was elevator surfing, which is just as dumb as it sounds. He somehow got his head caught in the cables and got it twisted around a couple of times. This did not immediately kill him. He died from asphyxiation. This means he had anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes to contemplate what had happened to him before he lost consciousness. Another one was sort of a mystery case. Headless corpse found in a truck in a national park. No head was to be found in the immediate area. Truck was turned on but had run out of gas. The wound was very clean. No sawing, almost like a guillotine cut. The investigating authorities were rather confused, but eventually they found a receipt in his pocket for 50 yards of nylon rope. They widened the investigation and eventually found the rope tied to a tree with a noose at one end. Further searching of this area eventually turned up the head. Pretty unique method of offing yourself. Mystery solved. This one isn't from the magazine, but a story personally related to me from the officer involved. A call comes in for a 50-ish black woman dead in a garage. Investigation reveals it is actually a 35-year-old white male. Dude put on a dress, rigged a noose to his garage door opener and proceeded to watch some pee in his garage while choking himself with a garage door opener. Battery in the remote died, and then so did he. Another case that sticks in my memory is of a guy that decided to kill himself with a .3006 and a .308. For you non-gun people, those are 2 very powerful calibers. Literally overkill. Anyway, this guy manages to get 2 rifles under his chin and fire them at the same time while lying on his bed. This obliterates his head. I mean, like there was nothing left but a stump. That isn't why the case sticks with me. However, what happened next is that the local forensic department decides to reconstruct the head as an exercise. They collect every piece, except for the orbital sockets, which evaporated, and put them all back together. The result came out looking very much like the victim, although slightly bug-eyed. The before and after of that is something I don't think I'll ever forget. Not a crime scene guy. Used to be a first responder. Guy was sitting at a table, slumped over, with every single knife from a very nice knife set sticking out of his back, arranged just the way they were in the knife block. Wife was standing there, still yelling at him for dying too soon. A lot of times family would rather you declare it a suicide instead of death by autoerotic asphyxiation. Yep. Dude from my high school killed himself and the school even has a day set aside to wear orange to honor the kid's death. But it turns out he wasn't suicidal, just trying to get off while using a belt and couldn't get the belt off either. His parents found him in his room naked with a belt 45 minutes later. Self-inflicted GSW. Pistol in each hand. 1 entrance wound, 1 exit wound. 2 spent shell casings. Neighbors report 2 shots fired. No bullet holes in ceiling, walls, furniture, windows, nothing. Sat at the scene for an hour with Emmy and 2 officers searching everything, but the bullets never turned up. Still scratching my head. Not me but my professor. This young kid, teens-ish, was playing with a loaded gun and accidentally shot himself in the face. He then tried to write "help me" on the wall with his blood. We saw the scene photos for class. Digital forensics case. Executive was using way more data than anyone else on his record. The local IT guys took it to check it out for viruses and whatnot. Found lots of child pee. Guy got brought up on charges. Lost his job. Family torn apart. The whole spiel. We do our analysis. Find out there was a virus they were serving said pictures for a dark website. Only thing that got him off was the rate at which the data was accessed. He got fat restitution, but that won't put his life back together. Made me get out of the business because I know this guy was guilty for sure, but we kept finding little hints that suggested it was something other than what we thought. Had we missed something, he would be in jail as we speak. Couldn't sleep with that kind of burden. I'm a specialty forensics investigator that focuses on fire and explosions. Somehow, a lady with a coffee can of gas, her husband's asphalt covered work clothes, and a front load dryer managed to turn the dryer into a rocket ship that launched through a plate glass window and 10 featuring into the road. We have no known models that can demonstrate how the available materials were able to launch the dryer. Attended a lecture by a pathologist once who told us that a man had killed himself accidentally while trying to clean his ear out with a matchstick, punctured a blood vessel, painted a wall with his own blood, passed out and bled out on the sofa. A friend's wife does forensics field work for a sparsely populated area and had said that only one case has been noteworthy. She was asked to analyze a crime scene in a house used to manufacture M. She surveyed the outside and then proceeded with an officer to the kitchen where the basement door was located. In the basement they found a metal door bolted shut and they decided to call for bolt cutters to enter. They didn't have them at the time, so she kept examining the area and found a side door to THR room behind a furnace. The lock was jimmered open and they found a sawn-off 12-gauge shotgun had been pointed at the bolted door. The gun was loaded and the tripwire still attached to the shotgun. She described it as the most chilling experience of her career. I worked in a morgue for a while. Lots of weird things. One case in particular stands out. A man was found dead in a food truck. He looked pretty normal from the outside. After we took off his clothes, things started looking a bit odd. He was wearing women's underwear that had holes cut in them for his dong. He probably had on around 20 pairs of the underwear. He also had a pump on his dong with a few condoms on. I don't remember what the cause of death was. Wonder what his family thought about it. The saddest case was two brothers out hunting. The older one, 14, shot the younger one, 12, accidentally when he saw deer. He hit his brother square in the back of the head, which leaves quite the exit wound on the other side. Yes, he did flip him over and see what he did. Feel bad for the kid. The coolest forensic story I heard was in a forensic math seminar a few years back. A guy killed his daughter but didn't report her missing until 8 or 9 months later. When they did find her remains, they were able to prove that she had died months before. The father claimed that he last saw her because there was a wasp nest in her skull. That particular breed of wasp only builds nests in dry places, so she had to have already been decomposed prior to their nest building season. Woman told me she would mail us a discreet sample for her paternity test. FedExes us a huge couch cushion with the tiniest CM stain on it ever. You have been visited by Moneybird. Upvote in 5,861 seconds and you will get rich. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.